And a lot of times when you listen to them, you can say, hey, well, based on this, let me ask more questions, right?
Right.
It'll give you that full picture. And then you're just providing a service. It's like, well, sounds like I can help you. And this is what I have. And most times people will come to that conclusion themselves and say, actually, I need help with this. Do you help with this? And you're like, yes, actually, I do. Now it's a much more organic conversation. It's not really selling, it's more providing a service.
Welcome to Sales Made Easy, a podcast for business and personal growth. Join Harry Spaight as he hosts sales experts and business owners who share their journeys of personal growth and business success. Now, here's your host, Harry. Thank you for listening to Sales Made Easy. If you found value in our conversations, please subscribe and leave a review. Our goal is to provide practical strategies for growing your business while staying true to your values. Remember, success in sales is about serving your clients. Serve first, and the selling will follow.
Greg Birch. I got to believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are.
Greg, for those of you who don't know, Greg and I recently met at Creative Con in Chicago or outside of Chicago in February. And this fellow is full of energy. And he came backstage to where I was trying to get pumped up before my speech. And I was listening to my AC/DC music, and Greg started chatting with me, and we're talking about getting fired up before we go on stage. And Greg's a big fan of Tony Robbins, shared some insight with me about Tony Robbins. Now I want to go see Tony Robbins and walk on fire. But I said, I've got to get this guy, Greg Birch, on my podcast. I love his energy. So we'll figure out what he does, but I'm pretty sure it's related to sales and leadership, communication, all those good things. Greg, welcome to the Sales Made Easy podcast. What's the good word?
What's the good word? First off, Harry, I appreciate you letting me, or just having me on your show with you. This is always a blessing and a pleasure of mine to come and speak. So thank you, man. But yeah, so like you said, we met at Creative Con, and we're both, you and I spoke on stage. That was an incredible event, by the way. That was
Yes,
just it was a really fun event, and a lot of different connections that I made with some really great people. And so, yeah, a little bit about me. Prior Army officer. I served for 11 years. Actually, one of the jobs that I did was I was a interrogator / source handler. So basically, I talked to people that I would find out that they had information that I wanted, because they were connected to people that were bad, or they were bad people themselves, but a little less bad than the worst people, right?
Right.
And I would convince them that it was a good idea to give me the information through influence, through sometimes elicitation techniques that we would teach, or just being friendly, like finding commonality with them. And so very similar to sales. And then I got out of the military, and I got into insurance sales as an individual insurance agent, banging my head against the wall for a while until I started realizing how to sell better. And then I started breaking sales records, which got me to start my podcast, because I started helping sales agents with sales techniques and what I was doing, because I was breaking so many records, and people just kept coming to me and asking, like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Right.
I was answering the same question over and over and over again. So instead I was like, hey, just go check out my podcast, right? Which is how I long-term roundabout got linked up with Julie and got to Creative Con. And then I created my own insurance agency, IMO, called Delta Financial. And then through that, I had some other things I started doing coaching, and it's coaching through fitness and nutrition, but it's really to help you in all areas of your life. So if you're in business, with your family, with your finances, etc., to help you to get more alignment in life through your physical, mental, and spiritual self. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent stuff. So first of all, thank you for your service, serving the United States of America. It's a great country. And you did that for 11 years, and you are doing this great work of interrogating people. And if you don't see Greg standing up, he is somewhat of a giant of a man. He's 6'7". He's built like a tree. And so I can imagine if you want information from me, it's coming out quickly.
Yeah. The height actually works against me at times.
Okay.
Most times, a lot of times it works for me.
Are you 6'7"? I think I saw 6'7" somewhere. I heard you say 6'7".
I said it on my speech.
Okay, all right.
Remember, that's how I opened my speech, because everyone always asks me, "Man, how tall are you?" So I was like, "Hey, I'm going to answer a question that 80% of you are thinking right now."
Right. That's so funny. So
Yeah.
did you see yourself going through all of that as, I mean, I'm curious as to how you got into sales and why sales after all of this energy you spent in the army and career opportunities that probably were coming your way. Why sales?
Great question, Harry. The reason why is because when I got out of the military, when I was in the process of getting out, I was a senior captain. I'd actually got selected to get promoted to major. And so, and if I would have took that promotion, it would have kind of locked me in to retirement, to 20 years. And I was like, if I'm going to take this promotion, I might as well stay for 20. But I was like, a part of me kind of wanted to go out and see what I could do as a civilian. So I started to get out my 10-year mark, but it took me about a year because I had to do some medical stuff from injuries I had, stuff like that. So it just took a little bit longer. But while I was going through my outboarding, which took about a year, there are companies that are what they're called JMO headhunters, which is junior military officer. And they specialize in helping officers that get out of all the services, and they link them up with Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies to help them get on executive level tracks. And what they do is they translate the skills, the responsibilities, and the job performances that you did while you're military. So, and they do that because a lot of as an officer, you are an executive level track. It's we don't have the same verbiage or the same language, right? That corporate America does. So that's their entire job is to do that. So what they do first is they put you through a personality assessment, and they look at your entire record, and then they tell you what jobs you'd be best for. And I scored very high in my influence and my leadership abilities, and so they put me high in leadership and high in sales. And so they just based off of my demeanor, my personality, and then my experience.
Yeah.
And so I started doing all this prep work to get into sales jobs, and reading. They gave me a bunch of books to read, like books like just a fantastic Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Who Moved My Cheese? To Sell Is Human by Daniel Pink. And there was another one that I read, but
I'm surprised Selling with Dignity didn't come to the top of the list. What?
It did not. So I read all these books, I got prepared, and then I ended up getting out before they had a job fair. So because they only have job fairs at certain, it's like every 3 months. And so I got out in between two job fairs.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting but he was working at a different company, not a sales job. It was like a leadership job. It was a district manager job. He got me a job there. I hated it. And so I started looking, and this was about 3 months I was working there after I got out of the military. And I was on Indeed looking for positions. And one of the positions, it was a very nondescript company with a nondescript, it was just like senior sales manager, something like that. And it was like looking for people with sales and leadership experience. And I was like, dude, that's exactly what I scored high in, right? I remember that. I was like, this is right up my alley.
Right.
And the pay range fit what I was looking for. And so I went and applied for it. And when I showed up, it was a life insurance company that was like all fully commission. And it was like all this. And I was like, this is a little bit sus. Like, this doesn't seem right. Right. They lied to get me here.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bad sign. But the reason I stayed and I did it is because everyone that worked there, they all drove nice cars, had nice suits, fitted suits, nice watches. Like, they were all making money. And so I was like, at the time, I was just like, I just want to make money right now. and I need an opportunity that I can make some good cash. And so I took it, and I was like, if I don't like it, then I'll get out. Right.
Right.
And so I got my license, and yeah, I've been in insurance ever since. That's 7 years ago.
Wow. And
So-
you, yeah. So it's funny, the jokes about life insurance salesmen, they escaped me now, but I mean, Woody Allen 100 years ago talked about the jokes of the life insurance salesman like it was the lowest of the low, and yet you seem to have done pretty well. And what's your attitude like about selling life insurance?
I think selling life insurance is like selling anything, honestly. No one wants to talk about life insurance because no one wants to think like, oh, I'm going to die. Like, no one really lives with that kind of perspective. And then when you do have that conversation, it's not that it's like 9 times out of 10, they're not negative. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about this because it's like, I don't want to think about dying. It's just like, nobody's really like, yeah, I could die tomorrow. Like, so that could, like, and it could, I could walk outside and go
Right.
to get my mail in my mailbox, and a meteor could come hurtling through space and hit me where I stand and kill me. Like, it could happen, right? The likeliness is unlikely. So since the probability is so low on all these things, you don't think about it. And so trying to get people to think about it is still even more difficult, just because it's not conceivable almost, right? Until something happens that hits close to home. And so it's having these very emotionally charged conversations with people that I have to get them to imagine worst case scenarios and then get them to plan for that worst case scenario if it were to happen. And then backwards plan from there. So, looking back, if I could do it all again, I would probably pick a different industry, to be honest, but I would still do sales.
Yeah. What makes you say that? Is it because of the challenge of going into that place where you just described? Would that be the reason that it's kind of a darker place? Or
it's because it's a multitude of reasons, right? It's a confluence of multiple reasons. One of them being that. The other being, like, right now, everyone, the economy's going. So I don't know if I can curse on here. If I can't, I'm sorry.
we could say the economy is going down the tubes. You want to
Going
say
down
that?
the tubes. So the economy, our inflation is ridiculous, right? The mortgage rates are higher than they've ever been, and people are having a tougher time living at the same quality and standard that they have been, say, 3-4 years ago, right? So when you get to that point where the dollar doesn't stretch as far, 9 times out of 10, what a family's going to do is they're going to look at their budget and they're going to start getting rid of things that they don't need. I hate to say it, but the fact of the reality is that the first thing that people get rid of are life insurance policies every single time, right? And so if I have a book of business that I'm getting paid on, and that's my income, and we go into a recession, and now people are just canceling policies, that eats into my income.
Right.
And having to ride that wave constantly of like, okay, well, now I got to go out and start selling a ton to make up for this loss of income. It's just a constant back and forth battle, right? And,
well, you just described really what business is. In a lot, I mean, there's very few businesses that just have an upward trend. There's a lot of back and forth with economic situations. So, which is super helpful, right? This idea of like, it's easy for a while, I get where I want to be, and then it gets hard again. I mean, I wish there was a better answer. I'm not sure what that answer is, but when you have it, let me know, because there's so much that's dependent on outside circumstances. So what is it that you do when you're seeing your financial situation change in front of your very eyes because the economy has gone downhill? What is it you do?
Me, well, since I'm an entrepreneur, I can control my own destiny in terms of how much money I make.
Yeah.
So it's really how much activity do I want to put in?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I just continue to put in more activity. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a blessing, really. Like when you get used to being a 1099 salesperson in any industry, having the freedom to be able to turn up the heat and make more money, like it's a double-edged sword for sure, because then it's like you can let off the gas and you can really quickly get to a point to where you like, oh, I'm in a bad spot. Like, well,
Yeah.
holy crap, where am I at? And I'll be honest, I've been in that spot multiple times in
Yeah.
my entrepreneur career. And it took me a long time to learn how to stay even keel, not get too excited, and not get too and let off the gas, and not
Yeah.
get too desperate and have to put all my effort on the gas, and staying in a middle space where I stay even, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do that roller coaster ride, which I've lived through for
Yeah.
a good 2 years when I first started.
Yeah. I think anyone who's been in sales to some degree has a bit of a roller coaster. I mean, you have a killer year, and then the following year may not be a killer year, and you've racked up some expenses or something like that. Not that I've ever done that, but just that smooth, consistency is really what the key is. But yeah, I just find it interesting that when you say you control your destiny, I looked at it like a sports fan. I think you probably have some similar sports interests. And over the years, Bill Parcells, one of his lines was, "You are what your record says you are." And in sales, it's like every day you wake up, it's you and the opportunity ahead of you. You can say, "I'm going to be great," or "I'm going to take the day off. I'm going to, sleep in. I'm going to do busy work," or "I'm going to go out and make some calls and make stuff happen." We all get to make that choice. And at the end, like say if it's the end of the month and you say, "Well, my month isn't that great," you get to look back and say, "What were my practices during the month?" And if the practices were, I did a lot of busy work, or I was all about this huge opportunity that took all of my time and energy, which is, there's some truth to that, but a lot of that is mental. It's mental bandwidth that it takes from us, whereas we probably had time to make more calls or do something that would be helpful in getting that consistency. So you said there was a couple of years where you were riding the roller coaster. I remember one of the stories you mentioned in Chicago. You said that you kind of had a little bit of an ego and weren't really working as hard as maybe some people worked. Do you want to just touch on that, and then maybe we can figure out where you fit the balance for that?
Yeah. So when I first started in sales, I think a very difficult entry point for salespeople is if you come in and you have a lot of success, right? Because what it does is it's false data that you take and you think, oh, well, I'm just really good at this, right? And you pump up your ego, right? And you get to a point where you don't do the necessary activities that are required for all successful, long-term, consistent, successful salespeople. And because you think that you're special. And so that happened to me. And so I had a lot of initial pop success, made some good money,
Yep.
and then transitioned from one company to another, got to this, third company. And I was just like, I was selling, but I wasn't selling a lot. And people around me were blowing me out of the water. And I was like, what is going on? And finally I reached out to this guy and, I was like, hey man, what's going on? Tell me how you're doing this. And he helped me. He gave me some help over the phone. He lived in another town, and he said, hey, I go to Dallas. I live in Dallas. And he's like, hey, I go to Dallas every once a month or so and go sell. Next time I'm there, we'll link up. And a couple weeks later, he reached out to me, and just as he said he would, and he let me know that he had just got done with all of his appointments for that weekend. And it was Saturday night. And he was like, hey, I fly out tomorrow, but do you want to link up and talk? And I was like, yeah, definitely. So he comes out and we meet. And when we meet, he tells me how he did. And that weekend he'd sold 36,000 in a weekend. And for people that are in insurance and don't know, like the 36,000 in a weekend's ridiculous.
Okay.
Average agent does 10,000 a month.
Okay.
Average agent does, and that's like good.
Yeah.
I would say actually average, if you're just looking at, I'm talking about average of who sells. 8% of everyone that gets their life insurance license in the entire industry actually sell. That's the average. Okay.
Okay.
92% of people, they don't sell at all. Like they'll sell like 1 or 2 policies and they'll fall off. So
Oh my goodness.
92% of insurance sales agents, right?
Wow.
So 8% actually kind of stay consistent in it. And that isn't even that they're good. That just means that they consistently sell. And the average is about 10,000 a month.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, this guy's, over 10x what I did in a weekend for this month. And I'm like, you got it. Like you're doing something unique or special or whatever. Like, what are you doing? Give me the secret sauce. And so he responded to me by saying, well, let me ask you some questions and see what you're doing and see if I can help. I'm like, okay, yeah. So he goes through a list of questions, basic questions. Hey, how often are you getting leads? How many dials are you doing a week? How many appointments are you setting? How many trainings are you going to? What's your calendar look like? Are you following accountable? Like basic fundamentals questions. And I was tap dancing on every single one of them because I wasn't following fundamentals, because I had success that I didn't thought I was beyond those fundamentals. And after he asked me questions, he just looked at me dead in my eyes and he was like, Greg, I know what your problem is, man. You think you're special and you're not. And for those of you that are listening, like at the time I'd been out of the military for a year. I'm a prior Army officer. I've deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've led soldiers in combat. And this guy who is a Russian American citizen, he's had his American citizenship for 1 year.
Oh my goodness.
He's got the thickest Russian accent ever.
Yeah.
He looks like Gru from Despicable Me. Like he's looking at me and telling me that I'm not special. And I'm like, bro, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but it ain't me. Right. But you know what? I sat there and I listened and I realized, and that message that he gave me that day became really impactful to me. It was like one of those times when you have somebody tell you something that you need to hear, but you don't hear.
Yeah.
And when I heard him say that, and when I reflected back on it, it's not that, because a lot of people hear that and they're like, but I am special. It's just like, no, you're unique, right? Special comes with it a certain connotation that inside you think that somehow the rules don't apply to you. It's more of an ego. Like I'm special. I don't have to do this, right? Only you do this. No. Everyone's unique. Everyone has unique gifts. Everyone has unique talents, time, and treasure, right? But if we take out the thing of thinking that we're special and we just start applying our own efforts to the same exact practices that the successful people are doing, there'd be a lot more people who are successful. And the problem that there's not is because people think that they're special. So yeah. That's what that it came down to. And it changed my entire perspective.
And what was your attitude on hearing this? I mean, did the ego come up or did you just say, this guy knows what he's talking about? I'm going to be completely coachable here.
My initial reaction internally was, who this guy think he is? And I stopped and I was like, but I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm going to listen. He just did 36,000.
Yeah.
He's got something to say.
Yeah.
So then I listened. And at the end of it, he told me, like, he went through all the questions point by point, what he does and what I should do. And it was simple. It was a simple plan.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to follow everything he says.
Wow.
And if it doesn't work out, then I can look at him and be like, dude, you were wrong. But I'm going to do it 100%. And that's what I did. And I literally changed that year. This was in November of 2018. And that entire year, 2018, I sold about $75,000 worth of life insurance, deposited about 65,000, right? The following year, I sold 425,000 by applying everything that he told me to apply.
My goodness.
Same person.
Yeah.
I I just applied what he told me to. And
So
I
what were a
literally
couple of the
applied-
changes? I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
think
okay.
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 What were a couple of the changes that you decided to take on? You said you did everything, but for the sake of time, what were a couple that were really important?
The biggest thing is really tracking your metrics. That's probably the biggest thing. Making sure that you track your metrics as a salesperson. And I talked, and I coach and train salespeople now. And so I'm like, hey, do you know your metrics? And most people are like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so if I give you X amount of, well, it's like, what lead source do you use? I use a lead source. Okay, I give you 10 of these leads. How much money are you making? Well, it just depends. You don't know your numbers.
Right.
You don't know your numbers. You're not tracking your metrics. You need to track your metrics backwards and forwards so much that if it's like, I got 10 of these leads, I'm making $6,000, period. Because you already know 10 of those leads is going to equal to X amount of appointments, which is going to lead to, or I'm going to do X amount of calls, which is going to net me X amount of appointments, which is going to net me X amount of presentations, which is going to net me X amount of sales, which is going to net average of X amount of commission, period, and stuff. You should know that backwards and forwards, right? And then it just becomes a mathematics game of like, okay, you want to make, instead of $6,000, you want to make 10. Okay. Well, then instead of 10 leads, now we got to go up to 16, right? You need 16 leads. And then you just start playing with numbers. And so like I ended up creating a spreadsheet that tracks all this for agents.
Yeah.
Where they'd actually get to track per call every single dial, like, and not answer, not answer, not answer, answer, set an appointment, answer, didn't set an appointment, call back, not answer, not answer, answer. And then it takes all those numbers and it gives you, hey, it takes you every 3.6 calls, you get an answer. Every 6.8 calls, you get an appointment. So it's like, okay, well, I just need to seven calls, I'm going to get an appointment.
Right.
And when you start to like actually break down the numbers like that, it becomes a lot more easy because it almost gamifies it, right?
Yeah.
And so then you can break down of how many appointments, hey, how many that actually showed, how many presentations did you do, how many sales did you do, and then you break out every single one of your sales. It automatically creates all these averages, and then it creates this spreadsheet on another tab where it's like, hey, here's all every single month, January through December, week by week, what's your sales? And then it starts to give you your averages based on if your performance is going up or if your performance, it'll tell you like, hey, it's taking you more leads to make the same amount of money. Or hey, it's taking you more dials to get the same amount of appointments. It'll actually start to highlight these things. Or if it's getting better, like, hey, you're getting more appointments with less dials. So whatever you do, so now you're like, okay, well, what am I doing differently? And it gives you an awareness to all of the situations. Because when you start to play with these numbers, let's just say, keep it real simple. You get 10 leads and then you make 100 dials and you set 10 appointments and 6 of them show, right? And out of 6 of them, you sell 4 of them. Out of those 6, you sell 4. And then you make $1,000 per sale. So 4,000. So 10 leads now equals $4,000. Okay. So now if you're like, okay, so I want to tweak this system. Okay. Because I want to make sure that I can maximize those 10 leads and make as much as I possibly can. So now I'm going to do percentages. So if I'm got 10 leads and I'm only setting 6 appointments, that means I have at a 60% right there.
Yeah.
Out of this, and now I got 6 appointments, but I'm only selling 4. That's about a 70%. Okay. And then I want to look at those 2 percentages and say, okay, well, I'm going to try to raise that 60% a little bit, right? So instead of setting with 6 of them, right, I'm going to sit with 8 of them. Okay. So I'm going to raise it to 80%. Well, now that's automatically going to raise all the tide for everything. So instead of selling 4, now I'm probably going to be selling about between 5 and 6. Right, probably like 5.5. Right. So now I'm gonna be making about between $5,500 to $6,000 just by making that little tweak. So it's like, okay, so now how can I sit with more people?
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking about a different problem set. Now it's like, okay, so how do I change my script when I'm calling these people to where I can actually improve the show ratio?
So good. Yeah.
Right. So now when I break it down like that, and I know where like the lowest percentages are, I play with just that one because it's a larger lever to overall impact my entire sales at the end of that funnel.
Right. So it makes sense. Like, so I love how you tie this all in to the end where it's really skills.
Mhm.
So if the numbers aren't there, the skills aren't going to be there anyway, by the way.
Yeah.
It is really difficult to develop skills unless you're facing the situation consistently. But when people say sales is a numbers game, I go against that. I say, well, it's not a numbers game. It's you've got to have the activity, but you got to have the skills.
Mhm.
But I love your approach to this because there's so much consistency here in breaking down the numbers and knowing your numbers. And then looking at those numbers and saying, what do I need to do differently? And that's where the skills come in.
Yes.
So you could have a C player skill wise can outperform an A player, sometimes purely an A player on skills, or maybe a B player. Let's go a B player on skills. And the C player just has way more numbers.
Mhm.
If the C player then increases the skills, then they become the A player because now they've got the activity, they've worked at improving their skills, and now they've got tons of potential ahead of them. Whereas people sometimes challenge when they hear sales is a numbers game, they chalk it up to, I just have to do the same thing over and over again, and the numbers will fall into place.
That's probably the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And you also, given your example, you have the C player that, hey, they're actually going to outperform the B player in terms of revenue, probably, or sales, because they just increase their numbers.
Exactly.
And a lot of times salespeople will make that mistake. So like the example I gave, instead of trying to develop the skills and increase the individual percentages and really try to maximize, because there's going to come a point where you can't maximize any further. Like there's going to be fall off, right?
Yeah.
But you can maximize to like an 80%, right? Now, if you don't do that and you just say, well, I'm just going to double up, I'm just going to get, instead of 10 leads, I'm going to get 20. So now I'm at 4th instead of 8,000, right? If you keep doing that, what's going to happen is leads will eventually get less effective. There's going to be something that happens, either like, for instance, in the life insurance business, leads are more expensive now. So a lead, when I was first buying mortgage protection mail leads, is $50 to $55 per piece. They're now $110 per piece because of the cost of mail. Also, the return rates, right? So now that you're looking at that, if I was the guy that didn't put anything into my skills, and I just kept increasing my lead flow to make more money. Well, now the cost of doing business is just double.
Yeah.
So am I really in a better position versus the B skill player that says, you know what, I'm going to stay. So I always recommend stay where you're at, get to a good baseline where you're making good money, start analyzing where you're spending your activity and your time, start analyzing your performance metrics over every single piece, every step of that business. Because I promise you, if you do it like this, you're going to find an area that there's a lever that you can pull and really get leverage and to impact all of that like the rest of that process, that sales process for you. Right. And so, and then you go through and start tweaking along the way. You change one thing at a time, focus on one thing, you pull that lever, you really get the change in, you start to see that raise, you do it consistently to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. And now it's consistently, now you're at, hey, 80% of people that I talk to, I'm sitting in an appointment with. Boom. That's awesome. Now I'm going to be like, I want to increase my closing ratio. Right? I want to increase that.
Right.
So I want to bring that up to 80%. Now I'm cooking with Crisco, and now I can say, okay, now do I want to get more leads, or do I want to get more lifetime value from the client by increasing referrals? Right. So I don't want to buy more leads, but I want to get more clients from my clients as referrals. Right. then you start to look at other ways that you can start to generate more business, and it becomes a game, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's a fun game.
yeah, it is.
Well, I mean, and you know, it's there's a lot of activity, and this is real sales. What you guys do and gals when you're out making these calls and you're investing your leads is so different than, you know, where people feel like they've got to have everything handed to them, and you know there's entitlement and so forth. That just does not work in sales. The whole entitlement thing goes out the window, because you are what your record says you are what your skills are, you are what your numbers are, you are what your conversations are. I mean, everything about what you do is soup to nuts sales.
Yeah.
So, and then when you look at someone who might be listening to this podcast that is part-time sales, right? They're growing their business, and they say, well, I'll never be like Greg, because Greg he's in it up to his neck every day. What do you suggest for someone who is whatever, the sign store owner or whatever the business is, an IT person that decides to start their own business? Is there any suggestions you'd have for those people?
I mean, so based on your question, it's almost like I see two pieces. One is the people that what it sounds like that are in a unique position, or they feel that they're not like in sales. So they're
Correct.
like, well,
Yeah.
that's Greg, but I'm not really a salesperson.
Exactly.
So, like, this doesn't really apply to me. Okay.
Perfectly said.
Perfect. Everybody sells. I promise you, I don't care. Like, you could, if you want to challenge me on this, if you're like, I work in the ER, I don't sell at all. Okay. You're getting people to take medication and they're blindly following it because you said it's what's necessary. You're selling them that it's what's best for them, right? That's still selling, right? Or when they're leaving the hospital, like, hey, these are the recommended activities to stay healthy that you need to do, that people are doing, right? You're selling them. Okay. And selling is just influence. It is getting people to do something, either believe in a product or a service or an idea that is going to get them to that they would not normally do without you presenting it, right? And so get out of the thought process that you have to be like this sleazy salesman, because when people think about that, that's manipulation, right? And that's the difference. Manipulation and influence are two sides of the same coin, because a lot of the same tactics and techniques are used, but that's the process behind it, right? When I influence somebody, I'm influencing them to do something that will benefit them, right? Now, it might also benefit me, but it will also benefit them for sure. When I manipulate somebody, it will only benefit me. It will definitely not. In fact, it'll probably put them in a worse position, but it's not going to benefit them whatsoever. It's only going to benefit me. That is manipulation. Now, the same tactics are used. A lot of the same processes are used in order to do those, but those are different. So stop thinking about manipulating and start thinking about influencing and helping people and believing in what you're doing. And you do this, everyone does this naturally, whether you're trying to, if you ever asked a girl out or asked a guy out, if you ever asked someone to marry you, if you ever like asked your parents as a kid to like let you go to your friend's house to play late at night, like you have influenced somebody to let you do something or to believe in something that you believed in. That's it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's sales. So start tapping into that. And if you start to think about when's the last time I convinced somebody of something, right? How did I do that? And you look at your natural sales style. Like, why was it that I was able to convince this person that an iPhone, the new iPhone was the best iPhone ever, and they should go get it? And then they did, right? You just sold them an idea for them to go buy something because it did it and it benefited you, and it did benefit you. And here's why: because it made you feel good, because it made you feel like you just made that recommendation. So you're like the go-to person, right? Now, you didn't make any money, but don't think about the money aspect,
right?
But think about, like, how did I do that? Like, was it because I believed in Apple? Was it because I believed in this iPhone? Was it because I wanted people to think the same way as me? You know, how is it that I was able to convince this person? And that's your sales style. So if you start doing that and you start applying that with any other business, let's say that you are wanting to start sales as a part-time and start selling to generate more income because what you're currently doing isn't giving you the income that you desire to do what you want to do in life. Well, find an industry that you believe in the product. There's sales in so many industries that you can back and honestly believe in, and then apply the same exact tactics that you would with selling anything else in life. Just like I was talking about. And that's where you start, right? And just get out there and then just start, like, honestly, get out there and get messy, like make some mistakes, fall down a lot, get your teeth kicked in, but because it's gonna happen. Like, just get used to it. And that's the recommendation that I would have.
100% on board with that, Greg. It's so for the business owner, you may not feel like you're going to make whatever 100 calls in a day, but if you're making 0 and saying, well, I'm not a salesperson, so I don't have to make any, we're encouraging you to look at that differently.
Yeah.
Maybe the number isn't 100, but it's probably not 0 either. And just starting to improve or increase the activity, you'll start to see results. You'll have more conversations, you'll have more opportunities. And, some people, they're doing everything. I understand that. But making the time for during the day, maybe it's a half an hour, maybe it's an hour, where you say, I'm just going to make some calls to people that I know, let them know what I'm doing. Your skill sets will get better. But I love what you said. Keep track of the numbers. And maybe one week you say, I've made 10 calls this week. Next week, I'm going to see if I can increase it.
Yeah.
And then eventually you start feeling it, and it is a game, and you reward yourself based on the calls you make, the conversations you have, and then the money that you make as well. So it's a process, but I think the advantage is that people like you and people like me, where we've been immersed in selling, this is what we breathe. So we didn't leave corporate not understanding. You didn't leave the army and just say, well, I'm going to be great in sales and it's all going to come to me. You had to figure it out. You had to go through the ups and downs and get the coaching, the training, and then commit and then do the stuff. And now you're like this, the game, and you can help others with this. So I love the story. I love sales because you're driving your own engine. It's your own, it's your own contribution to the economy. You're not only helping yourself, but you're helping tons of people. Everybody that you're coming across that becomes your client, and you're doing things the right way through service, not manipulation, influence, which is also great. I love how you divided that or separated those two. So a lot of great stuff here.
And I would say, the last thing as you were talking, Harry, you said something that really got me perked up a little bit.
Sure.
Something about service. And when it comes to selling, if you are trying to sell more for business, or trying to get over the thought process of like, well, I don't like to sell, blah, blah, like whatever. If you look at it in terms of service and like being like actually serving people, which all it takes is having a conversation, right? You never know who you talk to, what problem sets they might have for solutions that you can provide and then be of service, but you won't know that until you have a conversation. And so sometimes if you just start off the conversation or with like, hey, I'd like to ask you some questions to see what it is that you're currently facing and see if I would even be a good fit. And I don't know if I would be. And if I'm not, then just let me know. That way I'm not wasting your time, right? Just really organic, really like upfront. There's nothing salesy about that. It's like, hey, let me ask you some questions, get to know you a little bit, and see if I can actually provide a service to you. And if I can, awesome. If not, no worries. Like, just tell me, and I won't waste your time. Is that fair? Right? And most people are going to say, yeah, that's fair.
Right.
And then you start asking questions. Hey, how long have this? How long have you been dealing with this? Boom, boom, boom. And you start asking those questions, those what and how questions. Understand their situation, but don't be the salesperson that asks questions to get them just to say yes.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, do you like to drink water?
Oh,
Do you drink water
please.
every day? Do you want it to be clean? Do you like purified water? It's just like, dude, stop. Just get to your pitch already. It's like all these yeses in a row. You're asking questions that start with what and how that are open-ended, that are like, hey, when you think about X, what's your plan for Y? Have you, what plans do you have for XYZ? How long have you been dealing with XYZ? Right? What's prevented you from doing XYZ? Asking questions that start with what and how are very open-ended, and then you get them to talk and explain their situation. And a lot of times when you listen to them, you can say, hey, well, based on this, let me ask more questions, right?
Right.
It'll give you that full picture, and then you're just providing a service. It's like, well, sounds like I can help you, and this is what I have. And most times people will come to that conclusion themselves and say, actually, I need help with this. Do you help with this? And you're like, yes, actually, I do. Now it's a much more organic conversation. It's not really selling, it's more providing a service. So
Yeah, so good. And when you were talking about this influence, whatever this thing is, you get people to say yes. This to me falls down to manipulation.
yes.
It just completely, it's slimy, it's gross. Get someone to say yes 10 times on the 11th, the numbers show, whatever the data is, to me is just nonsense. For relationship selling or consultative selling, that's nonsense. If you're trying to sell something that is whatever, it's a mop for 1999 or something, that you're going to use it as a mop and a vacuum, and you do whatever you want. That's probably not my type of sale anyway. But consultative, where you're a real partner, please, no, I'm going to get the person to say yes 42 times. On the 43rd time, you're going to sign the deal.
Yep.
So yeah, great stuff. So you mentioned the what and how, and I'm going to ask you what your thought is on the why question.
So I'm a big fan of getting into people's why and digging into people's why. I don't ask people why, because why is accusatory. For instance, let's say that, like, for my industry, someone doesn't have a life insurance policy. Let's say, Harry, you don't have a life insurance policy, and I'm asking, hey, what policies have you had before in the past? And you're like, I haven't had any policies in the past. And if I were to ask you, well, why haven't you had any policies? Why don't you have any life insurance policies, Harry? That's kind of an attack on you.
It
right?
is. Yeah.
It's very much of like, well, you made a mistake. Why have you done that? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead, I can still ask a what question that will get the same exact point across and say, okay, well, hey, Harry, that's really interesting. What's prevented you from getting a life policy before in the past? Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is me asking, what third party issue, reference, external circumstance that you can point to and say, I haven't gotten a policy because of this.
Yeah.
Instead of saying because of me.
Yeah.
But it's going to open you up to be way more transparent. And also that tells me something that's been an issue before you and a potential objection further down the road, which could be like, I haven't been able to get a policy because they've been so expensive. Well, now I know you're going to have a price objection later on.
Yep.
So that gives me some ammo to know what I'm dealing with and what concerns you have, that I can start massaging into the conversation and making sure that I can deal with those issues while also getting you the product or service that makes the best sense for you.
That line of questioning can be used anywhere.
Oh yeah, in any sales, sales environment.
If you ask your spouse, why did you do that? Get ready for the battle.
Yeah. Or what motivated you
right now, or right. It's just, I'm curious what was behind that. I'd like to understand it, right? But why did you do that? Is for whatever reason, why where that came from, why we feel so challenged by it. But I feel challenged. I try to eliminate whenever I'm asking questions. So as soon as why comes out, I try to correct it and say what, and start figuring out what is the best way to ask this question. And you'll have better results than the why. Is that something that you learned in your interrogation practice as well?
Especially if you're sitting down with somebody that's done something bad. You know, a lot of times we're talking to people that like we found their fingerprints on a bomb or pieces of a bomb, and we're like, hey, we rolled them up, and then it's just like, well, why did you do that? It's just like, hey, what happened that got your fingerprints on that bomb? like
I have to ask.
How did that happen?
Yeah, right. What happened?
Like,
what happened with your fingers being blown off or something?
yeah,
So,
like you tell me the story,
Oh,
bro.
my
And then,
goodness.
now they're like, well, like sit down. Let me tell you. So,
right. Yeah, good stuff. I definitely love that part of the conversation. Greg, where can people find more of your brilliance, sir?
yeah. If anyone wants to find me or have any questions or just, have a conversation, which I love doing, find me on Instagram. I'm at Gregory A. Birch. On LinkedIn, just Greg Birch. And, I answer any DMs. Don't DM me on LinkedIn. But if you message me on Instagram, then I'll definitely answer everything on Instagram.
This has been real fun and love the conversation. So much success to you. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you for listening to Sales Made Easy. If you found value in our conversations, please subscribe and leave a review. Our goal is to provide practical strategies for growing your business while staying true to your values. Remember, success in sales is about serving your clients. Serve first, and the selling will follow.